May have took my tank out, but I'm not giving up yet. You're coming in, whether you like it or not. I hope you weigh the wide out in the western wastelands as we hop into Metal Saga. Considered the 5th title in the Metal Max series and a spin-off of the main series, Metal Saga was oddly made from strange shenanigans with the title being lost. I did go over a lot of this in my Xeno reviews, so if you're familiar with that, you could skip a little ahead, but to give a quick overview, temporarily, the creators of Metal Max lost the title of Metal Max due to the original company going under and it kind of hopping around until it would eventually fall back in their lap again. Metal Saga is considered canon to the Metal Max games, which is weird considering it's under a completely different development branch. With a new title actually being made, even though just, a few years ago, Metal Max was sold to another company from Katakawa, who sold the rights because apparently they just didn't know what the fuck they were doing after Rebirth. Anyway, back on hand, Metal Saga for the PS2 was the first Metal Max related title to come to America, and until the original Xeno, it remained the only one, which is a shame, because as anyone knows, I became very obsessed with this series very quickly, because I just love the idea. So, let's get into the plot before we start breaking down a lot of stuff, because there's a lot of shit to go into. Now, Metal Saga, you play as an anime protagonist who decides they want to follow their father's footsteps and become a great and mighty hunter of the wastelands. So you go to make your mark. And to make your first mark, you need to get a freaking tank, because, man, you're going to get blown up out of the fucking sea then. This is an RPG series that caters to tanks and a lot of weird mechanics. And that's what I really like about the series, because it's just so far removed from traditional JRPGs. It's a lot of interesting mechanics, even though it's not balanced. And this one is not any different from my experiences with the two Xeno games. Balance is a out-of-control monster in these games. But that's kind of the fun in a way, too, to be fair. This is a full-party system with 3 human characters, 1 being the MC and 1 being a dog. And that is your max party. And the dog is uncontrollable, while your other 2 humanoid characters along with your MC can be controlled. Now, combat works in 2 different ways, essentially. Out of tank combat and in-tank combat. Once you get tanks, about 99% of the time, there's almost no reason ever to do combat outside your tank. Sometimes there's a few moves that your character can only do while outside the tank that you may want to do that. And there might be a few small handful of situations where you need to get out of your tank to look in an area where your tank can't squeeze into. Or where you may momentarily be removed from your tank due to shenanigans going on in the storyline. But overall, there was not a lot of reason not to be in your tank. But there are a few instances where you cannot take your tank into somewhere. Like there is a particular dungeon, for example. Your tank cannot go in there. You have to go inside the area on foot, leading to the whole area to be an on foot type ordeal. So, while non-existent, the majority of the time you can take your tanks. And it is recommended because there's no real downside to using your tanks over your humanoids other than maybe having to pay for repairs, which money is abundant, and there are many ways to keep earning money. So as long as you're earning money, it's not really a problem to repair your tanks. And you can get EXP while in tanks. And since tanks are usually the more efficient way to blow shit up, that means you can, well, level up faster. You can get EXP faster, and thus, it's just better to be in tanks. Now, if you're coming into this game after playing Xeno or Xeno Rebirth, some of the stuff, more so from OG, is going to be more useful to you in understanding some of the mechanics in this game. However, there are a lot of conveniences that the OG Xeno offered that kind of make you appreciate how its menus and stuff were designed in it over this game, being a PS2 game with a lot more limitations and, I would imagine, a much smaller budget, probably. Similar to Xeno, there was a lot of customization in your tanks, the types of guns and things you slap onto it. Unlike Xeno, though, the freedom was not as open. Well, in the Xeno games, you have a lot more freedom on how to design your tanks and shit, like being able to swap what kind of fucking things they can install on them. You have a lot less freedom in that regard on Metal Saga. There are a few shenanigans you can do, but overall, you have a lot more limitations based off each tank. So normally, when you find newer tanks, generally they will sometimes be better, but it also depends on your playstyle and what kind of guns you like to use. Because, for example, if you like having some anti-air type guns, then, well, you're going to have a smaller selection of tanks that fulfill that. But that is a playstyle you can go for. I found a lot of special guns also not very useful in Metal Saga. There were a lot of special weapons in Xeno and Xeno Rebirth, and a few of them had some pretty nice uses, but most of the ones I've tried in Metal Saga didn't prove very useful to me. So how tanks work in Metal Saga is you have the body, which is basically dictates the kind of tank it is and its general stats and rules and boundaries to it. The engine, and the dual engine system does not exist in this one, unlike Xeno, which, to be honest, is a bit of a shame because that added a lot more extra freedom. The C unit, and then, similar to the other games that we're familiar with, you do have guns, cannons, and SE weapons. I found SE weapons a lot less useful in Metal Saga. Many of them missed or did very low amounts of damage compared to a lot of guns and cannons I would find or make. That's not to say there aren't any useful, but I feel like they're a lot more, how should I say, situational. Otherwise, it feels more useful to put on other stuff. And unlike Xeno and Xeno Rebirth, because there's no dual engine system, weight is a bigger problem in Metal Saga. So being cautious of how much crap you put on it is also can be tricky. The balance of trying to keep a health amount on your tank while not making it like super vulnerable by having too much crap on it kinda is a balance. There is an extra part, which are accessories, which don't take any they don't add anything, they don't weigh anything, but they add cosmetic flair to your tanks, and you can slap those on for some extra little flair. Now, unlike Xeno, you also have to buy extra shells. So, cannons and that get filled basically from doing a basic repair job. But when you use elemental stuff, like, say, like fire shells or things, you actually have to buy those and keep those stocked up to actually use those kind of shells. On top of that, you have armor towels too, which are your health of your tanks. Unlike Xeno, armor towels also take up weight on your tank. One armor towel is 0.01 ton of your tank. So, your health bar is also depicted on how much remaining free space you have, which is where the weight problem comes in. Because if you have too much heavy-ass shit and not some extra space to add towels, you're going to have a very small health pool on your tank, which you could go with it. You could make essentially a glass cannon type tank. That's not to say you can't. Personally, I tried to stay at least around 2,000 health for my tanks is what I generally did. But of course, that was just me, and everyone can do different ways. You can go more risque if you want. Don't recommend it though. Now, if a tank gets destroyed, your pilot of it will jump out of the tank and join in the fray of the combat without the tank. So, just because you lose a tank in battle doesn't mean the battle is quite over. But depending on your opponent, well, you could be in for an easy or hard time. Because honestly, some of the monsters, especially bosses that are made for tanks, unless you're pretty over-leveled compared to them, your humans ain't going to usually do a whole lot. But they can. They can still have a chance to do a few things. Now, each human character has a class. The main character is a hunter. You can get a mechanic and a soldier. There are 2 characters that are soldiers and 2 characters that are a mechanic. And then your dog, which comes in 4 different breeds that help dictate its type of abilities it has. All of these classes have skills associated with them. On top of that, there can also be a few unique things that are for unique characters. For example, the soldier characters are completely different fighting abilities. One uses a gun and one uses a sword, which means some of those skills that are related to guns and swords don't apply to both of them. Skills are really weird also in this game because there's no MP system. Skills cost money. Money makes this world go round, and it's going to be very important for upgrading, buying new stuff, and your loadout of your characters along with your skills. Like I said, if you have a healthy amount of income coming in, you're pretty much good. But if you do have some problems with money, then, well, you might have to reassess what you're doing. With that does mean you can essentially spam many skills if you feel like it's required. Just know after combat, you might have a hefty bill associated with that. Class also dictates a bit of what equipment you can wear as well. Though most equipment can usually be used by most people, it's usually the weapons that are usually the more iffy thing. Like a traditional RPG, you have weapon, head, body, glove, and feet. The pretty standard equipment set. Though there is one unique thing that I don't think I've ever really seen any RPG do, and that is the armor slot. Now, the armor slot's not to be confused with your body slot. The armor slot is kind of like bulletproof armor, you could say. There are many different types of it. Some block varying types of attacks, elements, or just damage. And they're interesting because they help basically lessen the blow of attacks. And essentially, there's no real reason not to wear them, because they can be very life-threatening. They can be very life-saving in a lot of situations if you happen to be wearing the right type. But they can break, and when they break, they turn into scrap armor. Interestingly, there's a mechanic, if you go back to the main character's hometown, you can turn in scrap armor for points that can use to turn in for some of the greatest armor in the game. I never actually purchased any of that to beat the game, but it's there if you feel like you need to. You can save up for it, and you can also even grind for it by intentionally getting weak body armor and have it get broken by shit. It is important to note, though, the dog can only have a weapon, armor on its body, and then armor. The dog can only have a weapon, armor, and then the body armor. And be honest, the dog is probably one of the most overpowered killers in the game. There were moments in the game where enemies couldn't even fucking touch it. It was pretty rare for it to be fucking even massively harmed in a lot of situations. The dog will likely become one of your most OP units, which is kind of funny in a way. Now, if you're familiar with Xeno, the hunting system is something that has originated from all the way from the very first game on the NES. So, it is probably not surprising to anyone that the hunting system still exists in Metal Saga. There are wanted monsters, criminals, and people out in the world, and you can find wanted posters for them on town wanted sheets. On top of that, you can also find additional ones that don't have wanted posters, leading to even secretive ones you can just run into the wild. And just like in Xeno, all of them have a price. And this is a great way to get fantastic amounts of money. Some of them are really easy. Some of them can prove to be a lot more difficult or having a weird mechanical system to them. It kind of also depends on when you encounter them. Now, you kind of have like a Pip-Boy kind of mechanic thing going on here, that you can bring up information of a lot of stuff, along with your wanted posters. You can bring up monster data, the monster of the week, which, if you hunt that monster and go back to the wanted shop before it changes, you can get bonus money. There's a mail system. You can get some additional information on stuff. You can remotely move your tanks around. There's an option to actually literally go to each town and see what items they had for sale. This is a very interesting thing I've never seen any game do. So if you're like, what town had that one item? Instead of having to physically go there, you can just check the list and be like, there's the town that had it. There's a alert system, like if you need a certain amount of money, you can set a alert for that amount, and you will hear a chime when you meet that goal. I never really made use of it, but there are, like I said, this world runs on money, so if you want a reminder of something, you can set that. There's an option where you can change the music. However, if the music changes in the environment, it will change that music. So like if you change it while exploring and then you're gonna battle, it will change that music back. So it kind of has a limited use. You have a section for any games you download, and of course you have options for setting up your controllers, and then you have a section for tutorial stuff in the diary area. The diary will give you insight of what the main character's thinking of certain storylines and characters going on in the game. It's not really anything too crazy, but still, if you want some extra insight on the main character's thoughts. Now, if you played Xeno, you're probably going to see, like I said, a lot of appreciation for how it did the menus and that. Because while a lot of the mechanics are pretty similar, you'll also be looking like, say, like... It's like looking at, you know, a older system and programming of all those ideas, if that makes any sense. So, like, Xeno's a evolution of those ideas. We're looking at the ideas of before, the limitations and the programming and such. Overall, though, it still works a lot. You do still have to tow tanks if they get fried. You have to get them repaired. Though, you can learn a skill to fix parts on your own for money, which actually, ironically, starts becoming vastly cheaper than taking them to a repair person, which is kind of weird in a way, actually. Two of the biggest problems I had with this game are things that Xeno addressed with. And I don't know if Xeno was necessarily the first one to address it, because obviously, like I said, the other titles have never been localized, and I have not gotten to play them, so I'm not 100% sure whether it's the force to actually kind of address this issue, but they are something that wasn't as much of an issue in that. So, force, the bigger issue, in my opinion, is inventory management. Now, inventory management is basically non-existent. In Xeno, you have basically infinite inventory. You don't have to worry about storing shit and stuff. This game does. You do have a limitation on inventory, and even more problematic is the fact that nothing can stack. So, things like the big medals that are collectibles, every single one of those you find takes an individual inventory slot. Now, I do feel if they stacked items, the management system of this game would not be as annoying, because then you would basically just be really managing your tank parts and maybe the few things of equipment you keep. But because all the different kind of junk, scrap, and other materials you'll find from combat and exploring the world, and on top of big medals, like, they all take an individual slot, and you can get, like, depending on what kind of enemy groups you're fighting, you can get lots of the different junk items that you can exchange for parts and things from various NPCs in the world. And that stuff builds up very fast, and if you do not actually partake in it, you will be filling up your inventory and your storage back at home with a lot of it until you go and actually do that, which, yeah, if you're going to partake in the crafting and making of equipment, I advise doing that often, because it builds up fast, and it can get very annoying to continuously go back home, withdraw a bunch of it, try to make some shit, go back home, withdraw a bunch of it. It can be a very annoying process, so you either partake in it or don't worry about it, either way. The other thing that was pretty annoying in the game is when you enter a form of combat and you don't have what's required to actually do the fight. Now, in some instances, this isn't horrific, because running away from most things is incredibly easy. But since some stuff isn't on the map 100%, like some of them is triggered via random fights, it can be annoying, because it's like, well, fuck, I need this to actually fight this properly, but if I run away, I have to fucking spend who knows how long running around this same fucking area trying to get the fight to happen again. And it can be a bit annoying. Now, in Xeno, each character could equip 3 weapons, melee, guns, and shit, and you could varietize the different kind of points of damage and effects that each character had, so you could cover a good amount of type things and effects. You don't have that in this one. Saga just has the one weapon, and you cannot change in combat. Now, if you could change in combat, like some JRPGs sometimes do have as an option, that wouldn't be as much of a problem then, but you can't. You cannot change whatever they have equipped in the middle of combat, so you have to leave combat to make any adjustments. Now, admittedly, these were mostly later game enemy bosses and that usually had this problem, and sometimes caused a fight to be way longer or harder to actually get hits in because of different effects. Because there is like a low system with enemies. They can be in the front, back, or in the air, and depending on that, different weapons and range of guns can hit different things and have different accuracy towards things. Like anti-air obviously has a better hit weight in the air, where like if something's in the air and you're using like a winch, you're not gonna hit it because it's in the air. Everything has its different advantages in that, so that is probably the other thing that can be a bit annoying in the later part of the game. For, I'd say, a good 60-70% of the game, you don't really have too much trouble in that. It's just way in the late game where there's a few wanted people, bosses, that can be a little bit of a problem because of the world they're in. Some of them are in high air, and to be fair, hitting things in the air is a more limitational thing. There's less stuff to address that kind of thing. And then there's a few special like stealth things and stuff that can cause a bit of a winch in your plan depending on how you build your team and stuff. On the world map, you can get a landmine finder, and you can basically look for items on the world map. This will, if you partake in it, will involve you really going all over the place, activating it. Luckily, you can hotkey it to a button on your controller, so you can hit a button instead of having to go into your menu. And you can hotkey several things, actually, to buttons, which kind of reminds me of the custom menu options you have in Xeno. Unsurprisingly, combat is a turn-based affair, if you're familiar with at least the original Xeno. I guess if you looked at Rebirth, then maybe you might be a little confused by that, so I guess I can't blame you in that department. The turn-based affair, and speed is ran very differently in this game. Basically, your equipment weighs you down, so basically the more naked and not in a tank you are, the faster you're going to be. And the more armor and shit you have on you, or if you're in a tank, the more slowed down you're going to be. This leads to your dog a lot of times being the faster unit in your military force of your forward party members. This could also cause trouble because there are enemies that love the one away, and if it's an enemy you need to kill, specifically a wanted monster, you might have to be a little creative on how to get it. Just like Xeno, guns don't have a ammo limit, but cannons and SE weapons do. So, if you want to preserve your ammo for more serious battles, you can simply just load up your gun, and hopefully, if you have a gun that just hits everything, you can make combat really fast. Please get guns that shoot everything, they'll save you a lot of time. Honestly, guns that shoot everything are a fantastic way to make grinding really quick in this game. But of course, you'll run into monsters that are actual bosses that are meant for you to be in your tank, which will deal serious damage to your tanks. Depending on what parts get damaged, they can have an out-of-combat or in-combat effect. Now, if you're going to use special elemental ammo, you can select the ammo tab to change the type of shells you're using, other than its generic shells. And if you want to use a character's unique skills or items, you're going to have them hop out of the tank. Now, nicely, there's actually a speed-up button, which was not very common for PS2 or PS1 games to actually have. And it makes grinding for money or items or anything you're particularly fighting really quick. So it makes a lot of the slog-type fights go by really fast, which is really nice. And just like Xeno, if you need to flee, you can flee. And as far as I can tell, there's really no actual failure to running away. Like, I don't think I ever seen flee not work, so you got a quick escape button option. Now, as you explore the world, you do open up a map on your little Pip-Boy type device that you have. And the map, well, it does help you locate, like, because some of the wand monsters will tell you where they are, and you can use the map to help you. But sometimes, like, the way the dots on there doesn't seem to match up 100% with, like, the mini-map. It seems a little off in some regards. Kind of eh. And some of the wand monsters that are, like, ran through random battle, because there's ones you can physically see and ones that only appeal via luck of a random battle. And a lot of the random battle ones, some of them are sometimes really fucking hard to get them to appeal. To the point where people actually have different agreements and disagreements on how to get them to appeal, or whether there were certain areas they could appeal in. There seems to be very, very different opinions on how their percentages and area of effect of them. Now, like, well, I guess I should say more unlike Xeno, actually. And Xeno is probably considered one of the more linear Metal Max games. Most of the Metal Max games are highly considered to be very open and explorative. Xeno was kind of chopped up into little blocks, and you weren't really made in a way that you could skip a lot of things. Metal Max is mostly known for that. Now, I can't speak on that because I only have Xeno and Xeno Rebirth in my pocket, even though I own all the other games now. And one day I hope to get around to them. I am here to tell you that Metal Saga definitely is very open. I mean, you can... If you don't get killed, you could very well potentially just run all the way to the fucking end of the game. You could potentially do that. As long as you don't die, which you could. Because the further you go for the starting town, of course, the enemies are going to get stronger. And I would definitely tell you, if you want to save money early, try to get to a further town. Because basically each town is designed to be an upgrade. But if, say, you skip to, like, the 4th town and buy stuff from there, you saved money because the other 2 towns are really close. And honestly, it's just kind of a waste of money to do a lot of upgrading them. So honestly, you would save yourself a lot of money and time grinding for money if you try to push yourself a little further town away and buy stuff there. And even if you can't buy anything, there's plenty of stuff you can find in crates and things. And usually there's 1 or 2 pieces of free equipment that the town sells in town if you look around. So even if you don't have money, it can still be worth checking out the town for freebie stuff. And similar to the Dragon Quest series, there's a mini medal system, big medals, that you can find also while scrounging for free stuff. Notoriously, the game's big medal system, though, is strangely incomplete and has always been a mystery in the game. So, honestly, nobody's ever, to this day, ever figured out any way to complete the big medal quest line. It has always been a mystery. So, I leave that information for your own discretion on whether you want to bother with that hunt or not. There are no items that you get in the progression of turning them in, and no one's ever found any grand finishing to it. And with the world being very open and everything, there was of course a number of side things. Side hunts, side dungeons, side tanks you can get. I didn't even find all of them. There are still several I didn't even find, and they're out there somewhere. So the world encourages you to explore and dig around everywhere. You can find quests, tanks, I found one of my early tanks just fucking on the world map. So, you can even find them that simply on the world for nothing. And other times you have to do a whole big dungeon for other ones. Finally, there's a lot of things you can potentially miss depending on how you decide to go throughout the game, because really, like I said, there's nothing really barring you from going to essentially where the end of the game is. Now, being able to finish the game, however, is a different matter. Because if you do go to the final dungeon where it's located too early, you will actually get turned around. You do have to trigger a few things to get the final dungeon to be available. Otherwise, though, you can basically go anywhere else in the fucking world if you can actually get there without dying. And considering running away is really easy, you can actually get pretty far. And of course, you can easily just save at the current town you're at and travel as far as you can. So if you want to rush the game, take your time, hunt down everything, just experience the storyline, it's up to your discretion. But yeah, if you want to do the storyline, there are very few trigger scenes that you have to do at a few different places that move the main storyline. But it's very light. Being a very open world game, you're just basically following your father and doing hunts. And you have to look for those kind of scenes that relate to your father. Otherwise, yeah, you just slowly work your way forward in that until you get the message about the final dungeon, and that's where you go for the end. As I mentioned, this game is completely unbalanced, just like the other 2 Xeno games. There is not a magical balance to this game. But it's very rewarding to break the game, to be fair. It encourages you to try out different guns, and customize your tanks to make them efficient as possible. It's fun, and it can get to a very nice, rewarding satisfactory to get to that point. If you want a game that's really different from the norm in the JRPG space, I definitely would recommend checking out Metal Saga. We only have 3 entries of this series in America localized. So, unless you're willing to play through Japanese and such, it can be a little harder to try out some of the other entries. But even to this day, I would say they are very unique in their own right compared to a lot of other JRPGs. I think a lot of the fun comes to, like, if you really like building up characters, that concept is took into your tanks in more ways. And I think that's where a lot of fun is just really looking for stuff in your tanks and making these really powerful tanks that just own shit. If you're looking for like a deep plot or anything though, I would probably just say pass Metal Saga. What plot is there is incredibly plain and simple, and even in the overall arching storyline of Metal Max, it's pretty blah. On top of that, to be fair, a lot of things feel unfinished in the game. There are several side quests, like the big medals, that just feel like they were things that were worked on, but never really realized or finished. And there were several things that continue to be a mystery in those regards to several NPCs. This game is fully confusing to a lot of people in the West, because it had a very small amount of people that really took time to invest a lot into this. It is a game that boasts, and I quote from the back, a full-scale RPG that offers unprecedented freedom, travel quests, a war-torn world with over 800 events and quests, and over 40 hours of gameplay. To this day, I don't think anyone ever really is sure if all these events have ever truly been discovered in the west side of things. Supposedly, the Japanese got an incredibly thick walkthrough guidebook for this game, which boasts about the many secrets. And there are a lot of events. Depending on the characters you bring with you, how you go about doing certain events and wanted things, and like, there's a lot of weird events you can just miss related to characters and stuff, which does encourage replay value. Now, there's no new Game Plus mode like Xeno offers, so sadly you'll have to start over. However, there are some post-objectives you can do. If you haven't hunted down all the wanted monsters, there's likely one that you still have not killed, because, honestly, it's actually harder than the final boss, I would say. It's actually a pretty hard encounter. Itself will unlock 2 wanted fights, a dungeon, and an additional party member you can run into. On top of that, you can unlock a boss rush mode in a strange dungeon that you might come across that honestly confused the fuck out of me when I came across it, because there's nothing in it until you finish the game. So if you went into that, that's probably the boss rush cave. So don't waste a lot of time there for now. This is actually how you can earn a lot of items so you can get more better tank stuff for the really, really hardest fight in the game. The final wanted hunt, which you can unlock by almost hunting everything in the game. And I tried that fight, it's hard. I got wrecked. So yeah, you're probably encouraged to go to the bus rush mode so you can convert items into better tank stuff hopefully and make a really, really cool ass tank for the fight. But yeah, I recommend the title if you like having a creativity touch to your combat and open worldness. Or if you actually liked the OG Xeno, I mean, I think it still has a lot of that appeal. But of course, it's on an older console, and it's not going to be as, how should I say, nicely designed in the menu management system. Some of it can be a little bit annoying, which makes you appreciate it. Now, how much would I say Metal Saga is worth? Now, I don't know what the original price for the game came out. I had no luck really finding how much Atlas sold it, who bought it to the West. Honestly, though, I think for what you get in this, I think $40 is a reasonable price. The normal price for a lot of PS2 games, value-wise, I think $40 is a reasonable price for the game, though. If if some people don't remember, the normal price for a full-price title was $50 back in the day for the PS2. And being a more budget and clearly, how should I say, not necessarily fully realized game, I think $40 is a more reasonable price. Luckily, though, if you want the game nowadays, it's still not very expensive. Getting a loose copy for, let's see, loose copy's going for $36, complete's going for $49, sealed $79, and, you know, beyond and beyond, blah, blah, blah. So, honestly, considering a lot of older JRPG prices have been going up in massive value, this game has not gone too crazy to be fair to it. It has a niche audience, and I can understand that. A lot of people want a really kick-ass story sometimes more than having a lot of more freedom in designing a party and skills and abilities and equipment. There are audiences for both of that. And yeah, like I said, if you're wanting a crazy storyline, you're not going to be getting that with this. That's not what you get with this. But yeah, I would give it a nice 40. I might be a little biased on that, but I think that's not too bad considering its day and time. Now sadly, if you're a digital only bro, this game is not available digitally anywhere. So physical is the only way to get, but like I said, it's still pretty affordable. However, if you live over the seas, aka you're not Japanese or American, there was no European version of this game. So if you happen to be European and you're interested in this, hopefully you have a American PlayStation 2 or some means to play American PlayStation games. Otherwise, you will probably have to look into that or get creative on how to do that. Overall, I enjoyed my time with Metal Saga. Again, it's not perfect and it's certainly not balanced. But I really like the idea, and I look forward to trying even older entries into the series, because it's just amazingly creative to me. Like, I don't know anything that's very like these games. It's just really interesting people tried to make an RPG like this. And to think, you know, the original game was on the NES, so, like, this whole concept is something the series has done all the way to one of the older systems. And I look forward to hopefully trying another title in the series sometime in the future. With that, let's get into spoilers real quick before we move on to finishing up. So, as I said, the story isn't too, like, crazy or anything. You go after hunting your... well, not hunting your father, but I mean, like, following your father's shoe steps. And as you do that, you'll get messages from your father saying, like, oh, I'm proud of you and stuff. But eventually, you start finding out your father's been getting involved about going against these weird men in black type people that you will encounter several times through the game. The more you explore, the more you're likely to run into them. But the few of the instances that you do run into them, all requirements to triggering the capability of going to the final dungeon. Eventually, you'll get a message from your father saying he's at, I believe it was called Hell's Keep. And that is the trigger for being able to go to the final dungeon, meaning you can drop literally everything else you're doing in the game and just head straight there if you want to finish the game. You'll go there, and you'll meet the head of these men in black, which you did get to meet once, named Alex. And you find out Alex isn't human. He's actually a part of the mother brain system that went haywire, which is a supercomputer called Noah that basically decided that mankind was a problem and began the Great Destruction, which attempted to destroy humanity. Alex is built by this. Now, most of the Metal Max games deal with something that is basically trying to do the will of Noah and further continue destroying humans. But Alex basically tries to destroy everything by shooting off another missile, an ICBM, to hopefully finish off the remains of humanity. However, the final boss fight, you'll go up against Alex the Missile and stop all this from happening and save the remains of humanity. And like I said, there's a post-game where you can unlock the boss rush mode, and depending on whether you want or were able to, because you technically can fight on that one wanted monster that unlocks an additional party member in a dungeon and that, but it's just really freaking hard, so you have to level grind if you want to get that before the end of the game, that is. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the story. It's pretty kind of dry, nothing too amazing. It's probably the most simplistic story out of all of them. Probably right there with Rebirth for Xeno. Now, I did mention there's also the really hard fight that you unlock by basically getting all the wanted monsters. Not really all of them, but almost all of them. She is Scarlet, the greatest wanted person in the world of Metal Saga. And she is fucking hard. She will slap your face immediately if you go into the fight unprepared. Actually, funnily enough, the game will actually let you get into fight without being in your tank and troll you for it. Well, the story is very minimalistic. I really did enjoy the gameplay still, though. For as imperfect as it is, it still remains a very interesting game, and it's a real shame that a lot of people in the West didn't appreciate that. Several reviewers gave it a very poor score. There were a few places that did give a decent score to Metal Saga, rewarding it for its uniqueness for it though, so it was nice to see that some people did appreciate the oddballness of it, but overall the West did not seem to appreciate the game. Interestingly, in Japan though, the game earned a respectable 30 out of 40 from Famitsu, which gave it a good review, and it apparently sold really well during its week of release, with reportedly 63,219 copies its first week. And by the end of 2005, it had sold 99,374 copies in the region. The Metal Max series is niche even in Japan, and there's a reason a lot of the entries are very expensive though. Overall though, I definitely recommend checking out the game if you find any of what I said or what you see interesting. Otherwise, you know, there's always another RPG out there to try. But this one I feel like leans a lot on the mechanical side versus the story. I know there was a lot of gobbledygook to go over there, but that's Metal Saga. If you feel like you learned anything interesting, feel free to leave a like. And if you feel like you learned nothing interesting at all, feel free to leave a dislike, feel free. And until next time, thank you for joining me for this unique PS2 experience. Till next time, maybe we'll see another Metal Saga game down the road. Maybe not, I don't know. Time will only tell!